Today, Rick and I are going to dive deep into the Leica Q343. We've been shooting with it over a month, including lots of stuff in Europe. It's a camera that we both love.
Yes, we do, but we're not keeping it.
But it might be perfect for you. We'll talk about all that and explain why. Well, hey everyone, welcome to this video. It's Hudson, and I'm lucky to have Rick LePage here with me in the studio. And we're going to talk a lot about Leica's new Q3 43mm today. We put it through its paces in Scotland. Big shout out to our good friend Mark Smith for bringing it all the way from Portland to us. It arrived here at the studio while we were both in Italy. And he picked it up from my wife Stacy and brought it over. He was a participant in the workshop.
And we spent a lot of time with that camera in Scotland.
Toting it around streets at night and landscapes, shooting people, even some, well, not exactly wildlife, but Scottish Highland coos. And we'll show you images from all that. It's not going to surprise you that its image quality is just superb. And we'll talk about what we love about this camera and yet why it's not exactly the right camera for either of us.
But it is, I mean, the thing that I find most remarkable is how wonderful these Q cameras have been. I mean, the Q2 and the Q3, we both come from, you know, long history. Me with Sony, you with Nikon.
Knowing you with Canon and Nikon before that.
And there's something about this, the Qs. I mean, the Leica interface is wonderful. It's one of those things that when you pick this camera up after shooting a month with the Sony, you know, I can pick that up and just go right into it as if I was, you know, had been shooting it all along. And that doesn't work. I mean, that was one of the things with the Fuji, the X100 that we tested recently.
Really took wrapping your head around how the menu system and controls worked on that camera, customizations. Leica should be highly commended for the user interface on the Q cameras. It's this wonderful blend of old school aperture and focus ring, shutter speed dial with everything you can imagine, customizable buttons and power controls and options, all laid out in a simple, easy to navigate interface that I think you can get acquainted with in a day. It's special that way, alongside its 60 megapixel sensor and the incredible lenses, both the 28mm in the standard Q3 and the 43mm Q in this new version of the Q3. The lenses don't have a bad setting.
No.
And the image quality and dynamic range and high ISO performance is shocking from this sensor.
I mean, you know, for years, my favorite camera in the world was the Sony RX1. You know, it had 35mm f2 Zeiss lens. It was small, compact, had a great sensor on it.
Full frame. How many megapixel?
It was 42, I think.
Right.
And I love that camera. I still have it.
You took it around Cuba. You can click the link above to see some images that Rick shot in Cuba with that camera. We talked a fair bit about it.
But it's old school. You know, it's very slow. And you know, it was, when I bought it, I think it was a $3,500 camera just by itself. I mean, it was expensive.
Fixed lens.
But it's that combination of a really great sensor and a fantastic lens. And
designed to work together. Right.
And you know, I'm still shooting with the Q2, and it's replaced the RX1 for me. You know, because it's it's this thing about a rangefinder where you get one lens that's tied to the sensor, you know, and the lens is amazing, and it just works really well.
It does.
You know, and so it was interesting. I've enjoyed the Q2 with the 28-1.7, and when I heard rumors about the 43, I got really excied about it.
Yeah, because that's in your focal range wheelhouse, particularly for some of the stuff you do on street.
And it was, you know, again, these cameras are not cheap, right? You know, and that's one of the things when they announced the 43, it was $7,000, and I was like, you know, I could sell my Q2 and probably another lens or two from my Sony collection, and I might be able to spring for it. You know, but it's the lens on this sucker is like the lens on the 28. It is amazing.
It is.
You know, they have the same feel. You know, it's just a different focal length.
there's a couple accessories that, if you're interested in this camera, we've got links in this video. You can just click on it, or you can always go over to hudsonhenry.com/ATS links, or just click up above. And we'll talk at the end about some accessories for either one of these Q cameras that you might want. But we're going to kind of compare these two and showcase why, in the final analysis, given the other gear that we have, the 28mm makes sense more for both of us, and we can't really rationalize having two $7,000 fixed lens cameras. You have to, most of us in this world have to choose one or the other. If you're blessed with not being concerned at all about dropping $7,000 each and having these, you probably should, because it's amazing. So should we just jump in and look at some images, and talk about some images from it? Indeed. All right. So,
all right,
Scotland.
So we got the camera in Scotland, I think
Glasgow.
actually 2 nights before the workshop opened. And Hudson was like, "You're the street guy, you go out and shoot with this sucker." And so I spent a couple of days, I did, and it's a, 43 is so different from 28.
It's very different.
But I felt right at home with it. Here's a shot of the firefighters from World War II, a little monument there.
Outside Glasgow's Grand Station, train station.
And there's Hudson with that firefighter looking down on him. And that 43 range is lovely. This is actually a pretty big crop of, I just love the reflections over here, and it's like, it works for me. It's beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
This is the type of stuff that I love to do with the RX1, because it had a 35, and it just, brought things in a little bit tighter.
Right.
And like the Q3 28, the black and white is phenomenal in this camera, And for little details in the street, more reflections.
We were both shooting that building, and I had the 28 with me, and I was like, "Whoa, Rick has the right lens for that." It just didn't work out very well at 28, that particular scene.
Yeah.
You could crop.
Yep. And this one, I love. This is a crop, but it's also, this is 1,000th of a second. You look in here, that sensor is just money.
It's phenomenal. It's phenomenal. Look at that.
It's just wild.
It is.
And I actually underexposed this quite a bit. The original, this is all much darker. And I was worried that maybe, the faces wouldn't come through, but it did.
Well, that's amazing.
Again, just sort of like out there shooting.
Well, that's the thing with this sensor in the Q3. I trust myself to underexpose a fair bit. I'll shoot in that highlight weighted metering and not worry about the fact that the shadows look inky, because they'll pull.
Yep. But it's a nice camera, just shooting people on the street.
Yep.
I enjoyed it at night. It's, again, that sensor is something else. And this guy, this image has been manipulated a fair amount, and
6400 ISO.
Yeah, and it's just it works.
It does work.
This is handheld at a 15th of a second.
Love it. Yeah, no, the image stabilization is wonderful on these Q3s.
And then we went to Fort William, and I was just out shooting. This is a perspective. It's got the perspective control feature in the 28.
If you haven't experienced that in a Q3,
it
gives you this little trapezoidal reference frame within the viewfinder or on the back LCD that it will turn to a square after you shoot and maintain the 60 megapixels, and it just straightens lines even though you're turning left, right, up, down. It's nuts.
Yeah.
And you can see the framing as you do it. It's amazing.
This is our favorite ramen restaurant in Portree.
And on the Isle of Skye.
Yeah, and I love this little setup here.
I love the way that the out of focus rendering falls off. It's just like the 28, but it happens a little quicker at 43.
And we saw a bunch of coups, and the only camera I had was the 43, and they all came up to us, and it was like, well, all right, I'll fill the frame.
They were used to being fed by people coming by to look at them. Yeah, there were people feeding them apples. Yeah, it's great.
But it's a phenomenal portrait camera. It really is.
It is. But so is the 28, just in a different
Yes.
way. We'll talk about that in a minute. Yeah.
You know, I mean, landscapes are, you know, they're more challenging at 43 than they are at 28, but you can still get good stuff out of it. You know?
And you can shoot panoramas. We'll talk about that in a
You
minute.
know, one of the things that while we were doing these tests and everything, our buddy Chap, who has a 28, you know, and I've heard this a couple times from Chap, you know, it's like, I don't see the world in 28.
He's been shooting a Leica M camera with a 50 for so long.
And he's going to love the 43.
He will.
You know, it will work. And that's the thing. You have to sort of think about how do you want to shoot? You know, what's your comfortable range for shooting? You know?
What makes how does the world look to you? Like I see things vertically more than horizontally, unless I have to, you know, or in a panorama, which
yeah. So, I mean, you know, as a landscape camera, this was a beautiful morning in the up above Uig, you know, on the Isle of Skye. You know, this is a pano, a 2-shot pano.
Look at that.
You know, up and down.
just to get a little wider angle.
Yeah.
The camera held vertical.
Yep.
Yeah, there you go.
You know, and this shot, you know, this was another shot that we were out shooting at the Three Sisters overlook, I think, or the waterfall.
Zoom into those trees for me.
And this ray of sunlight just sort of hit at this one moment while I was turning around looking at across the road, and this captured it beautifully. You know, if I had the 28, it might be okay, but I'd be doing a lot of cropping. And you know, this camera will crop just as well as the 28. So
you can crop even more.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. It's a similar sun star. You know, it's not my favorite on the planet, but it's just fine with almost no ghosting and flare issues as the 28.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed it as a landscape camera, but I had much more fun in the streets.
And photographing people.
I wish I had the 43 when we were in Venice.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
Or,
you know, as a portrait camera, this is our friend Fabio. You know, and you know, those types of shots I loved.
Oh yeah.
You know. And then you've got some images.
Yeah, here are some of my favorites from just shooting on this. Well, shooting the 43. I've got some 43 frames in here that I just love. This was day one. You know, Rick and I were kind of handing it back and forth, and that's when I said to him, you know, you love the streets with a tighter frame, so you take the 43. But initially, I was running around with it, and I remember just seeing these reflections, and I put it at f11, and I set the focus marks at hyperfocal distance where infinity was just inside f11, getting to as close to me as possible. And I started reaching down to frame up something in the puddle, and then Rick kept walking. I was like, hey, and then I thought about it and just shot as he crossed the sun. and I love it. You know, I love the way that came out, and that ability with either the Q328 or and maybe even more with the Q328, but with the 43 as well, to just stop down and use hyperfocal distance and not worry about focusing in street type scenes like this where you want everything in focus, just setting infinity inside your chosen aperture and letting the camera get as close to you as possible and focus as well. One thing that I found a little challenging with it, and I think I was challenged enough that I wasn't even paying attention to my shutter speed very well here. It worked out because Rick was still for a second. This is as the workshop crew was starting to get together the first evening at the hotel in Glasgow. And I was trying to use the autofocus with it, and I felt like it was a little more hunting and seeking than I'm used to with the 28 1.7. And so I was a little frustrated in this moment and wound up manually focusing. I put the focus point on Rick and manually focused to get his eye sharp, and then waited for the right moment and photographed. And that made me think, I do that a lot with my other favorite lens. We'll talk about that in a minute. But photographing people in the landscape, this thing is just a wonderful portrait lens. Here's our good friend Bill in portrait. Rick contemplating one of his trees. Rick loves to photograph the lone tree, so I like to put Rick with the lone tree. And then this might be my favorite photo that I took.
This is one of my favorite photos from that whole time.
It was just down by the water in this big bed of kelp and debris, kind of where the fishing boats pull in Portree, the little fishing village, well, the biggest town on the Isle of Skye. And this feather just caught my eye, and I liked the overcast light, and then I saw what an interesting little world it was, and I put the 4.3 in its macro mode, stopped down to f11, leaned in, fired this frame, and I just love it. And it just goes to show what this sensor and lens combo is capable. It's so wickedly sharp at f11. It's even sharper at f5.6, believe it or not, but it's also sharp at f2, you know, and it's sharp at f16. It's just, it's an incredible, incredible lens. You know, here's wide open, photographing this coup. There's no crop on this. That was as close as I could get to this particular coup, and it worked at 43 millimeters. It's a nice view of it and its environment, and I like the way it matches the browning bracken ferns in the background there. And that f2 aperture, even though it's, you know, it lets it, even though he's further out there from me, lets that background fall off a little bit, feel a little fantasy-like. But then, you know, the coup did walk up and got close, and I like, you know, that 43 millimeter range gives you that 50-like ability to sort of isolate subjects and make it all about your subject without being right in their face. It's a different, you know, I don't know that person, and I was able to capture that image. With the 28, I could capture something different but similar, but I kind of need to know them. Yeah, I'd be right up in danger of the horns. And here's a pano, just handheld, fired off with the Q343 up at the Kerrang.
And that's one of the things that I was talking with a couple of people in the workshop who were like, well, you know, I really do love shooting landscapes. And it's like, well, just make panos with this.
Oh, you know what? This is not handheld. I put it on the tripod. I'm looking at it and thinking I can't handhold 2.5 seconds that sharp.
Yeah. Okay.
This was getting pretty low light, so I was on the tripod. I threw this thing on the tripod. And one thing I think you want as an accessory for this camera, because I shot this as a vertical series of images overlapping. I think that Really Right Stuff's L bracket grip for this camera with the QD port on it is just, if you're gonna get a Q3, or a Q2, I think you really want to have that L bracket in your arsenal. I mean, you may not use it all the time running around town, but I do. Yeah. And I love it for people in the landscape. You know, this photo of Chap at the Ferry Pools, the Ferry Falls, and Fabio again. And we're going to get into a series here of Fabio. These are my favorite photos with the 43 from the trip. I shot with it less than Rick because I really quickly ascertained that while I love it and I think it's amazing, it doesn't fit well into my current scheme of equipment.
Yeah.
It's like another thing I don't necessarily need, and it's so expensive.
Which is something, I came to sort of the same conclusion.
Right. But it takes beautiful images.
Yeah.
This is an image I took of Fabio in a little harsher light, a little harsher edit. He took this, he wants good portfolio images of himself, and he's such an entertaining character. I took this photo of him with the Q328. Right up close to him, right? And you know, Rick said, well, I'll take one of you too, and he had the Q343. Not much different in distance apart. It's a different kind of portrait, and I think I'm a little more drawn toward that environmental portrait than I am the headshot.
I think you're right.
And so this lets me show more about where he is and what the environment is. They're both wonderful. They're both wonderful. You can't fault either one. And I feel like with even the 28, when I'm comfortable with someone, obviously like my beautiful daughter Pepper here, I can get right up close to them and look at f1.7. I can do a headshot with the 28.
Yeah.
You just have to be right in someone's face and close up. And again, you know, the environmental portrait, this bar in Charleston where Rick and I were grabbing a burger and a beer before the workshop started. I love this photo of you. And the 28, you know, if you zoom in and have a look at that lens is incredible. Wide open at f1.7. And, you know, the streets of Venice. I'm drawn as a photographer to having more foreground and more sky in my photographs. You know, less, I love the little details too, and I love working with a fast 50 sometimes, but I have a fast 50 already that I love. And we'll talk about that in a second too. I'm just going to show you some things I've done with the Q3 that make it such a versatile, or I mean the Q328, that make it such a versatile camera for me. Here's a panorama, another one from the Q328 that's, you know, a vertical series of shots. I shot this on the tripod with a little neutral density at a half a second in a beautiful woods in the Dolomites. Here's Rick at a spectacular lake in the Dolomites, and it was snowing so hard on us, and I could shoot this handheld with the Q328, and I got the whole boathouse and the docks. I shot a panorama of this too with that combination that I love. this castle up in the Falls Orego Pass. The 28, I'm also a lover of photographing landscapes, and 28 is a wonderful landscape focal length, and you can go to Panoramic and get even wider. It works for me for storytelling imagery.
Yes.
The 28 works for me for storytelling imagery. That focal length, I feel that I could in many situations travel with the Q328 and nothing else.
Yeah.
And you know, here's the capability of that image to make that camera to make dramatic images. I love the fact that I can throw it into bracketed burst mode, and it'll automatically fire all 3 frames, bap, 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 3 stops apart. It'll do 7 frames, 3 stops apart if I want, with one press of the shutter button instantaneously. And it's so easy to get into and out of that mode, and it does such a beautiful job.
I mean, that's one of the things about the Leica interface, you know, is that
Simplicity.
Whichever one you're using, you know, it's easy to get in and out of the different modes in a way that our other cameras don't do as well.
Indeed.
You know?
This is a JPEG that I basically didn't touch out of the camera. I shot RAW plus, when I shoot black and white with the Q3s, either the 4.3 or the 28, I tend to shoot in RAW plus JPEG because it doesn't embed the profile, the picture control profile in the RAW file for Lightroom Classic to read when I bring it in. So I like to have the black and white JPEG to sort of see how to tone the color image that comes out.
That is one of the things that I really wish Leica would figure out how to do.
I wish, because Nikon does it, Fuji does it,
Sony does it.
Yeah. You shoot in monochrome mode in the Nikon, it'll come in with the RAW file looking like the monochrome world you saw through the viewfinder. I like viewing the world like this through the Leica's viewfinder so much.
Yeah.
And I like the way the files come out. And often I just run with the JPEG. I mean, this is almost untouched straight out of the camera in its standard black and white mode. So yeah, it shoots beautiful images. Now here are some images from an entirely different camera and lens. This is sort of the reason why I don't need the Q343. And it's not going to be a surprise to regular watchers of this channel. I love the Voigtländer 50 1.0 manual focus lens.
Yeah.
It's small, it's not light.
Nope.
It's not cheap, but it's not horrifically expensive.
Well, and on the ZF,
Yeah.
it's an amazing combination.
It is. It is.
And I mean, I'll tell you that as a longtime Sony guy, the one thing about the Nikon world that has sort of made me go, God, I could shoot with that camera all the time, and that is the ZF and the 50 1.0. I love that combination.
There are many times where I have this in a holster.
Yep.
From, you know, I have my Naiva strap with the Navine holster, and then I've got this on my Lumalab sling, and I've got a 28, and I've got this 50 that just gives me unlimited depth of field. And in bright daylight, I slap a 3-stop neutral density filter on here.
Yeah.
In order to be able to shoot right down to f1.0 like I did. My friend Sajal and her son Dylan here. This is my best friend from law school. We went to Berkeley together, and she's the executive director of the San Francisco Baykeeper, and her son Dylan, who's about to depart as a freshman for MIT. Amazing. They're an amazing, I'm very proud of them. They're wonderful. But this is in Mazatlan, the Total Eclipse workshop. And, you know, I just put 3 stops of neutral density on, shot them at f1.0, and you've got the Faro Lighthouse mountain back there. It's beautiful. I love what I can do with 1.0.
Yeah.
And 1.0 is 2 stops faster than 2.0.
Yep.
You go from 2.0 to 1.4, from 1.4 to 1.0. It's 2 orders of magnitude more light for working in night and in low lit scenes and for letting that background go to pieces. Here's the most appropriate photo of JD probably ever taken. I love JD. I can't wait to see JD again. This was in Costa Rica with the ZF and the 51.0. You know, it's just wonderful working out and isolating your subjects, low light situations, being able to handhold. You know, here's down a 15th of a second at 1000 ISO, you know, which is more than hand holdable on the ZF. I can easily handhold down to a 1/6 without even using burst mode. Hand holding, you know, at a 15th again here of our hotel in Fort William in Scotland. And I can still use zone focusing. I set this at f11 or at f7.1. and I zone focused it a bit. I think I set it, with f5.6 just inside infinity, knowing nothing was very close to me. And I saw these birds going crazy, and I was turning around to see what was going on with Rick when I saw this woman, and she's just amazing.
Yeah.
And then the birds were, this man back here was feeding the birds with his kiddo, and they were just, I don't know. This is my son Pike at Halloween right after we got home.
Yeah.
And I loved his outfit so much, but we were in town. We were I just wanted to isolate him. F1.0. I think I came off a third of a stop there at F1.1. But some scenes from Halloween with my kiddos this year. This woman who was in a hair salon that they had all set up for the kids to play games to get candy, and she's seated in a chair under that table with a hole cut in it. I think it's a box.
Yeah.
That she's wearing. Or, a trip into the Japanese gardens. These are all with the Voigtländer 51.0. Pike shooting with the Q328. Probably one of the only 8-year-olds out there shooting a $7,000 Leica. Well, he's probably not the only one, but he's good at it. Mm-hmm. And one of my favorite trees in the world. It was a little past its prime. It's been a rainy fall, but, shooting it at f2.8 with that kind of just falling off color, the structure of it works really well. I guess the take home is, for me, there's nothing not to love about the image quality, handling, user interface, everything that you're used to with Leica Q cameras. And this lens is amazing, but it doesn't fit into my world as well. If I had to choose one or the other of these, it's gonna be the 28 for me personally.
Well, and for me too. I mean, even though I do love that camera, I'm with you. I mean, first of all, as I just said, I do think about buying that combination.
The ZF with the 51.0.
Well,
and it's half the price for both of these together, as this camera was about $3,500 for the two of them put together.
But I've got a 51.4.
And you love that. You've shot such beautiful images with that lens.
This is a great combination, the A7R5 and this lens. And I
also 60 megapixels.
Right.
Right.
And if I'm feeling like I'm going someplace and I want to shoot street, I could take the Q2 28.
Right.
I could take my 35-1.4 and I could take my 50-1.4.
Yeah.
And that's all I need to do.
Right. Probably not all at the same time.
No.
But you pick which for the night you're taking out.
Yeah. I mean, and I feel like I agree with you too. The 28 millimeter. I mean, the lens is fantastic.
Oh yeah.
And it's 60 megapixels. This is why I'm sort of drawn to. Should I sell the Q2 and get the Q3, to get the 60 megapixels, and a couple of the other enhancements they made there,
particularly where the controls are.
And that appeals to me more because, again, I agree. I could take this with me on vacation, and that would be the only thing. Like, I'm actually going on vacation in a couple of weeks, and I'm thinking all I'm going to do is take that and probably the 51.4.
There you go.
So
when I go to Baja this year, my intention is to just take the Q3 28, my drone, and the Nikon Z9 with the 100 to 400 to shoot kiteboarding. My friend's kiteboarding. I will, and birds.
Yeah.
So this will do everything except the sports action and wildlife.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would, you got to think about what your setup is, how much money you want to spend.
Indeed.
I mean, I do feel like if it came down to buying the 43 or buying the ZF and the Voigtländer, that feels like an easier thing to do.
And owning it, I'm thinking, if I take this, I'm going to miss the 1.0.
Yes, you are.
I just am.
Yeah.
I did. We were shooting out at night in the street, playing around with it, and I was like, here, Rick, take that. I want my 1.0.
Yeah.
And, it's just a special lens that I've learned to work with, and I love.
Yeah.
I love. And if the fact that this isn't autofocusing quite as well as I'd like in ultra low light situations, I wind up manually focusing with it anyway. Both of them are wonderful and easy to manually focus.
Yep.
So,
I think if you see the world in a 50 type of way, like our friend Chap,
Or if you have unlimited resources and you just want both.
Yeah.
But there are other options, whatever camera brand might be your main brand of choice. I think there are a lot of wonderful lenses in the 50 millimeter range for just about every brand. That's been a lens that's been a staple of street photographers since the dawn of street photography.
Since Henri Cartier-Bresson and the original Leicas.
But if you are considering a Q3 of either variety, a couple things I think really enhance the user experience are these soft touch buttons. Leica sells ones for a really expensive price. I don't remember, it's like $75 or something. Yeah. And then there's For one, yeah. And then there's this brand that I've got. You can buy them off of Amazon where you get a silver, a gold, and black. Black. Silver, gold, and black for like $15 for all three, and they're just as nice. In fact, I kind of like them better.
Yeah.
So I've got a gold one here on the Q3. I also keep a gold one on my ZF, silver one on the Q2. That's kind of how I kept them separate because they look awfully identical. Well, a shorter hood too. Yeah. There's UV filters. We're stocking UV filters in the store for this, as well as case 49 millimeter kits. You can also use an adapter from 49 millimeters to 82 millimeters and use neutral density. I've done images with this camera at, it'll run right up to 120 seconds internal without using a cable or anything. And you can do wonderful long exposures and blurred clouds and things. I think probably the most important accessory, though, I mentioned earlier, is one of these Really Right Stuff L-bracket grips. The grip is super comfortable. It makes holding the camera secure. I know a lot of people get the little hot shoe mount thumb rest, and I find it a little awkward because you have to reach around it to get to this often used thumb wheel on the back of the camera, and I don't feel like it makes it any more secure when I have the grip on here, which I always have. And it gives me access to the SD card, it gives me access to the battery, it gives me access to the ports. You just have to stick a small enough finger in there to get and you can charge the camera via either a PD battery bank or through a wall charger that's PD capable, and it's got an HDMI port. Everything is accessible with this guy on there. There's no real need I ever take it off. And I love that it has a QD port for carrying on my strap too. So yeah, and I've got links to all this stuff, as I said, on my site, as well as in this video's full description. Rick and I love this camera. It'll be sad to see it go. I must admit, I'll miss its little gray leatherette finish.
It's a beautiful camera.
It is.
It's a beautiful camera.
It is. But just not one that I actually need.
That's correct. Yeah. Nor I.
All right. So that's it. You've spent your time with us talking about the Leica Q3. Oh, one thing I didn't mention. I have user settings for this camera, just like I have for the Q2 and the Q3 on the website. There is an issue in there's a bug with regard to function 2 button throwing the camera into video mode. It can be frustrating. There's also a workaround and fix. You just need to hit the link in this video's description for the user profiles. Yep. There's an instruction detailed on that page. If you follow it exactly, you can get around the bug. It's been around for the last couple versions of the Q3 firmware. The firmware is identical between the cameras, so these profiles will set up shooting modes for you that limit the options on the customizable buttons. It's a handy thing because it kind of gives you an overwhelming number of options, so I limit them each to a different set of options that make sense together, as well as giving you profiles for shooting in black and white, for shooting people, for shooting landscape, standard shooting mode, action shooting mode. So,
and you can get to those just going to the hudsonhenry.com main page. There's a free download section with camera profiles.
Perfect. All right. So thanks so much, everybody. Oh, office hours
in the future.
Sign up for the next office hours. We have these big free group meetup sessions where we talk photography on Zoom and YouTube Live, and people can have their questions answered. Sometimes we do gallery submissions and look through people's images, and we spend a perfectly good hour talking about photography together.
We do.
So you can sign up for that at hudsonhenry.com/office hours. You can also click up here. Also, workshops.
We're getting ready to post the last 4 workshops of the year. Some of them might have been posted
for next year.
For next year.
For next year, 2025.
Yes. The Brookings workshop, the Mount Rainier workshop, and Scotland workshops. And you can go to hudsonhenry.com. There's a link right up at the top page that you can ask to be notified about 2025 workshops and beyond. And if you haven't filled that out, now's a good time to do so.
Yep. All right. Hey, thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you're out there staying safe, staying creative, and we'll see you next week.